The Galactic Empire stretched its iron fist across the galaxy, its navy blotting out the stars of countless systems. Conquest was routine, a monotonous checklist for the Empire's military elite. After all, what species could resist legions of genetically enhanced soldiers armed with energy weapons and orbital bombardment at their fingertips? Certainly not humans. In a cavernous war room aboard the Empire's flagship, High General Varnal reclined in a throne-like chair. His armor gleamed, polished to excess as if his most arduous duty was posing for statues. A hologram of Earth hovered before him, rotating lazily. Officers lined the room, their expressions ranging from bored to smug. This campaign was already considered a foregone conclusion. Humans, Varnal drawled, dragging the word out with exaggerated disdain. Barely capable of space travel, they couldn't win a game of galactic checkers, let alone survive our occupation. The officers chuckled, a chorus of sycophantic laughter. Captain Threx, whose mustache appeared to have more tactical experience than his brain, leaned forward. "Shall we prepare the victory speeches, sir? Perhaps we could throw in some quotes about humanity's valiant but futile struggle. The usual nonsense." Varnal waved his hand, as if swatting a particularly slow fly. "Too generous. Let's just go with inevitable domination. No need to dress it up." Meanwhile, thousands of miles below, humanity was indeed struggling. Valiantly, but not quite futilely. Earth cities had become crumbling battlegrounds, the skies swarming with Empire drones. Conventional warfare had failed spectacularly. Every counterattack dismantled with mechanical precision. Tanks melted under plasma bombardment, and infantry were picked off like sitting ducks. Yet, even with all their technological superiority, the Empire had overlooked one human talent: adaptability. And hiding within a bombed-out city was an example of this talent, though she didn't look particularly imposing. Corporal Nadia Kane lay flat atop a ruined skyscraper, her sniper rifle balanced on a pile of scorched rubble. Her dark hair was cropped short beneath a dusty cap, and her gray eyes were narrowed behind a visor. She had spent 2 days in this position, barely moving, camouflaged by ash and shadows. Patience was not just a virtue, it was her weapon. Her partner, Private Jax, crouched in a half-collapsed stairwell behind her, his face smeared with dirt and nerves. Jax was good at 2 things: chewing energy bars and delivering running commentary. Right now, he was doing both. So, Jax began around a mouthful of crumbs. "Think the Empire's figured out what we're planning yet? They haven't even figured out which shoe goes on which foot," Nadia replied, adjusting her scope. Her voice was calm, but clipped. She reserved extra syllables for people who didn't irritate her. Right. But if they do figure it out, we're toast. Fancy, crispy toast." Jax pantomimed, exploding in slow motion, complete with sound effects. "Jax," Nadia said without looking, "you've got about 10 seconds before I use you as bait." He wisely shut up, though the faint crunch of an energy bar suggested he was still eating his feelings. Through the sniper's scope, Nadia surveyed the approaching Empire forces. The troops marched with clockwork precision, their black and silver uniforms unmarred by dust or blood. Each soldier carried enough firepower to flatten a building. And yet there was something almost casual about their formation. No cover, no attempt at stealth. They believed the humans had already lost. Nadia smiled faintly. It wasn't a kind smile. Back on the flagship, Varnal continued his victory monologue. "I expect this occupation to be complete by next rotation. Perhaps we should leave some humans alive as museum exhibits. Future generations of the Empire will enjoy their quaint little stories about freedom and grit." The officers nodded vigorously. None of them noticed the lone communications officer in the back, whose face had gone pale. Sir? We just lost contact with Delta Squad." Varnal raised an eyebrow. "Lost contact?" "Yes, sir. One moment they were reporting routine patrol status, and the next the officer swallowed hard. Static. Varnal's amusement flickered. "Probably a malfunction. Human weather systems are still primitive. Sandstorms, electrical interference. All quite beneath us, of course." Meanwhile, Nadia was already repositioning. Her first shot had been perfect, A clean hit to the squad leader. The Empire troops, stunned by the suddenness of the attack, were scrambling like headless chickens. She had deliberately left one survivor to spread panic. The survivor was currently sprinting back to base, abandoning his weapon in favor of flailing arms. "Careful," Jax muttered. "They'll regroup soon. Let them." Nadia was already selecting her next vantage point. Every shot had to count. Every miss was a wasted opportunity, and wasting opportunities wasn't something she could afford. By the time the survivor reached the Empire's forward command post, word had spread like wildfire. Empire soldiers who had previously swaggered through the streets were now darting from cover to cover. Officers barked frantic orders. The entire operation had devolved from a victory march to a paranoid dance. Back on the flagship, Varnell was no longer lounging. He leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "Who's responsible for this?" "Reports suggest a sniper, sir." The communications officer looked as if he wished he were anywhere else. "A sniper," Varnell repeated slowly. "One human sniper is causing all this chaos?" "Yes, sir." There was a long, awkward silence. Then Captain Threx, he of the decorative mustache, cleared his throat. "Shall I prepare a more detailed victory speech, sir? Perhaps something about the Empire's valiant, but ultimately victorious struggle?" The look Varnell gave him could have melted starship armor. Back on Earth, Nadia settled into her new position. The Empire had stopped laughing. Good. She intended to keep it that way. A cold wind swept through the crumbling streets, scattering ash and debris like ghostly confetti. Nadia Kane knelt in the shadow of a collapsed monument, her rifle resting on a pile of rubble. Her gray eyes were focused, calculating. She had spent hours here, unmoving except for the occasional flicker of her fingers across her rifle's controls. Patience, she reminded herself, was not just a virtue. It was her way of staying alive. Behind her, Jax fidgeted noisily, his foot accidentally kicking an old can down a flight of broken steps. It clanged all the way to the bottom, announcing their position to anything within a half-mile radius. "Jax," Nadia said without turning around, "are you auditioning for the role of loudest idiot in the apocalypse? Or is this just a hobby?" "Sorry," he muttered, kicking another rock in what appeared to be an act of defiance. "Stop kicking things. You're not a toddler. Sometimes I wonder if you even like having a partner," Jax grumbled. Nadia scanned the street through her scope, ignoring him. "You're not my partner. You're my spotter. There's a difference." Ahead, the Empire's troops were advancing, though not as confidently as before. Since their last encounter with Nadia's sniper rifle, they had learned some caution. Gone was the swagger and lazy marching. Now they moved in tight formations, ducking behind walls and drones that scanned the skies for threats. The Empire commanders had even deployed a few sensor bots, hovering, beetle-shaped things designed to detect heat signatures and track human movement. Jax noticed the bots first. "They've brought out the bug brigade." "That's never good." "They're nervous," Nadia said. "Nervous soldiers make mistakes." She adjusted her scope, lining up her next target. And mistakes get exploited. The squad paused at an intersection, waiting for a signal from their commanding officer. Nadia's finger hovered over the trigger. "Don't do it," Jax whispered. "They'll triangulate the shot." "I know. Then why?" The rifle cracked. The Empire officer's helmet shattered, the soldier dropping like a marionette with its strings cut. Chaos erupted instantly. "Because," Nadia said, breaking down her rifle with mechanical efficiency, "now they'll think we're over here." She slung the weapon over her shoulder and grabbed Jax by the collar. "And we're going over there." They moved fast, ducking through alleys and hopping over debris. The Empire's response was swift. Swarms of soldiers and drones converged on the sniper's last known location. Laser fire scorched the air, peppering the rubble with glowing craters. By the time the Empire troops arrived at the intersection, Nadia and Jax were half a block away, crouched in an abandoned diner. Nadia knelt behind the counter, assembling her rifle with the ease of a pianist at her favorite instrument. Jax peeked out from behind an overturned table. "You know, sometimes I wonder if you're just doing this to annoy them." Nadia smirked. "I won't deny that's a bonus." The Empire soldiers were visibly frustrated. They combed the area, searching for any sign of movement. Every now and then, one would gesture wildly to a superior, as if that would magically produce results. Their frustration reached a boiling point when a drone misidentified a stray cat as a hostile target and blasted it with a barrage of lasers. The cat escaped with a singed tail, but morale among the soldiers plummeted. Jack snorted. Almost feel bad for them. Almost. Don't. Nadia adjusted her scope again, this time targeting the Empire's mobile communication unit. A squat, heavily armored vehicle with antennae bristling like porcupine quills. If we take out their comms, they'll be blind and deaf. You ready? No. Good. The shot rang out, followed by a satisfying explosion. The communication unit erupted in a fireball, smoke billowing into the sky. Empire soldiers scrambled, some shouting orders, others panicking. That should slow them down, Nadia said, already moving again. But the Empire wasn't giving up that easily. From the smoke emerged a new figure, a towering officer in black combat armor, flanked by two elite soldiers. His helmet, marked with the Empire's crimson insignia, gave him the appearance of a predatory bird. Oh, Jax muttered. They brought out a commander class. Nadia's jaw tightened. She'd heard of these commanders, ruthless, highly trained, and very difficult to kill. This one had the demeanor of someone who'd been woken up too early and was now very, very annoyed. The commander surveyed the wreckage, then pointed directly at the diner. They know, Jack said, eyes wide. Move! Nadia ordered. They darted out the back, just as the diner's front wall exploded in a shower of bricks and glass. Nadia rolled into an alley, firing off a few shots to keep the pursuing soldiers at bay. This is bad, right? Jax asked, panting as they sprinted through another narrow street. It's not great, Nadia admitted. They found temporary cover behind a rusted-out transport vehicle. The commander and his squad were closing in, their footsteps heavy and relentless. I'm out of tricks, Jack said, unless you've got a plan that involves snacks. Not snacks, Nadia said, but maybe dessert. She reached into her pack and pulled out a small, cylindrical device. Is that? Yep. She activated the device and tossed it into the street. It clattered loudly, drawing the attention of the Empire soldiers. The commander signaled his troops to move in. When they did, the device erupted in a blinding flash of light and sound, disorienting everyone within a 100-foot radius. Nadia didn't wait for the effects to wear off. She popped up from cover and fired 3 rapid shots. 2 soldiers went down instantly. The commander stumbled but recovered, his armor absorbing most of the blast. Time to go, Nadia said, pulling Jax along. They disappeared into the shadows just as reinforcements arrived. The Empire was officially in disarray, and Nadia intended to keep it that way. Somewhere above, on the flagship, General Varnell's mood had darkened considerably. Who is this sniper? He demanded. No one had an answer, but Nadia Kane had one. She was the turning point, and she wasn't done yet. The sky was a patchwork of black clouds and streaks of plasma fire, the horizon smudged with smoke. Nadia Kane crouched on the rooftop of a half-demolished government building, her sniper rifle resting against her shoulder. The scope's lens reflected the flames below, a city on the brink of collapse. Jack sat beside her, nervously dismantling and reassembling a grenade for the 7th time. You know, this isn't exactly how I imagined spending humanity's last stand. How did you imagine it? Nadia asked, her tone dry. More fireworks, less running for our lives. Stick around. Fireworks are coming. Beneath them, the Empire had brought everything they had left. Troop carriers rumbled down ash-covered streets, unloading wave after wave of soldiers. Heavy artillery units positioned themselves on every street corner, flanked by drone squadrons. The commander from earlier led the assault, his crimson-marked armor gleaming despite the chaos around him. They're not messing around, Jack said, watching as the commander barked orders with sharp, precise hand signals. Soldiers fanned out across the city, sweeping every alley in ruin. No, they're tired of playing cat and mouse, Nadia said. They want this over. What's the plan? Nadia was silent for a long moment, her gaze locked on the advancing forces. We split them up, confuse them, hit them hard and fast. Got it, confusion I can do. Jax's talent for causing chaos was about to be put to good use. While Nadia remained on the rooftop, he darted into the nearest building and began setting up a series of makeshift decoys. Noise emitters scavenged from old tech, rigged to sound like sniper fire. As the first emitter crackled to life, a burst of static-laced gunshots echoed through the streets. The Empire's soldiers froze. The commander's head snapped toward the sound, and he signaled a squad to investigate. Nadia took her shot. The lead soldier dropped before he even registered the ambush. Panic erupted in the ranks, and another squad peeled off to search for the sniper. The moment they did, Jax activated another decoy, this time on the opposite side of the street. The Empire was running in circles, chasing shadows. But the commander wasn't so easily fooled. He spotted one of the decoy emitters, crushed it underfoot, and roared something in his guttural native tongue. Nadia? Jax's voice crackled over the comm. I think we made him mad. Good. From her rooftop perch, Nadia adjusted her aim. Her target was the mobile artillery unit stationed near the city's central plaza. It was heavily armored, surrounded by a dozen soldiers and a defensive shield generator. But Nadia wasn't aiming for the generator. She aimed just above it, where the shield's emitters were exposed for half a second during each recharge cycle. She fired. The shot hit dead center. Sparks erupted from the emitter, and the shield collapsed in a shower of crackling energy. Before the soldiers could regroup, Jax lobbed 2 grenades into the plaza. The explosion was deafening, and when the dust cleared, the artillery was nothing more than a smoking crater. That'll slow them down, Jax said, sounding almost giddy. But the celebration was short-lived. The commander had regrouped his remaining forces, and they were closing in fast. The streets were swarming with soldiers, and drones buzzed overhead like angry hornets. They're not retreating this time, Jax said. Nadia's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time, but they still had one advantage: unpredictability. Jax, get to the rendezvous point, she ordered. What about you? I'm staying here. I'll draw them out. There was a pause. You're insane. Probably. Go. Reluctantly, Jax disappeared into the shadows, leaving Nadia alone on the rooftop. She took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. Her rifle was down to its last few rounds. She'd have to make every shot count. The first soldier appeared at the base of the building. Nadia took him out with a single shot. Another followed, then another. Each one fell before they could even raise their weapons. But the commander wasn't far behind. He ascended the building with terrifying speed, using debris and handholds like a seasoned climber. By the time Nadia turned her rifle on him, he was already at the top. They faced each other across the rooftop, smoke and ash swirling between them. The commander's crimson-marked helmet glinted in the fading light. His blaster was aimed directly at Nadia's chest. You're outnumbered, he said, his voice cold and mechanical through his helmet's translator. And out of time, Nadia didn't lower her rifle. Funny, I was just about to say the same thing. With a sudden, fluid motion, she fired her last round. Not at the commander, but at the support beam holding up the radio antenna behind him. The beam shattered, and the antenna toppled like a felled tree. The commander barely had time to react before the antenna crashed down, knocking his blaster from his hand. Nadia didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, tackling him to the ground. They grappled, each fighting for control. The commander was stronger, but Nadia was faster, and she fought dirty. A well-placed elbow to his ribs gave her just enough leverage to grab his fallen blaster. She aimed it at his helmet. Yield. The commander didn't move. For a long, tense moment, it seemed like he might refuse. But then, slowly, he raised his hands. The battle below ground to a halt as the news spread. The Empire's commander had been defeated. By nightfall, the remaining Empire forces had retreated. Humanity's last bastion still stood. Jax found Nadia on the rooftop, sitting beside the unconscious commander. He grinned. I told you there'd be fireworks. Nadia allowed herself a small smile. Don't get used to it. Above them, the sky cleared for the first time in days. And for the first time in a long time, humanity had hope.